Hello, and welcome to Lesson 2.5, Solving Equations Involving Absolute Value. Our objective for today is that I can solve and graph absolute value equations. So this first section is looking at absolute value equations and solving them for the given variable. When we're doing this, first off, let's rewind to Module 1. When we talked about absolute value is the distance a value or a number is away from zero on the number line. That distance is always going to be a positive magnitude. So it can either be 13 steps to the right or 13 steps to the left. It's always going to be that positive distance. That's how many steps it would take to get to zero. Now, when we are solving one of these equations, essentially what we're trying to do is figure out what are the possible values of the variable that when we took the absolute value of it, we get a positive 13. So we're going to split this once the value equation is isolated. Once you have the absolute value isolated, we're going to split this into two equations. One of them, we just drop the absolute value bars and leave it alone. The other one, we drop the absolute value bars and we change the sign of what's on the other side. So for this one, we have y equals 13 and y equals negative 13. If you were to substitute in either of those two values for y and take the absolute value, you would get an absolute value of 13. Now, letter B, we have 2x minus 4 is equal to 8. My absolute value is already isolated. There's nothing else on the left side of my equation other than the absolute value. This is the time that we are allowed to split these. So you have 2x minus 4 is equal to 8, and you have 2x minus 4 is equal to negative 8. Because again, we're trying to figure out what is going to make the piece on the inside of the absolute value be something that could give me an absolute value of 8. So that's going to be either a positive 8, 2x minus 4 is going to be positive 8, or it's going to be negative 8. Either way, those absolute values would then give me a positive 8 value. So now we're going to do our work, and we are going to do opposite operations just like we have in our previous couple lessons. So we add 4 to both sides. 2x is equal to 12. And I'm going to do this on both equations at the same time because we're doing the exact same steps for each equation. So 2x minus 4, again, we're adding 4 to both sides. Negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. And now we divide both sides by 2 in both equations. And we get that x is equal to 6. We get that x is equal to negative 2. Now, if we were to go back and we were to do a little bit of work to check our answer, right? 2 times negative 2 minus 4. 2 times negative 2 is going to be negative 8 or negative 4. And negative 4 minus 4 is going to give you negative 8. And when you take the absolute value of that, you get a positive 8. And on the left side, if we did 2 times 6 minus 4, 2 times 6 is 12 minus 4, and 12 minus 4 is 8. And when we take the absolute value of 8, it is just 8. So our work checks out. We can see how both of these values will get us to a positive 8 absolute value at some point or in some way. All right, letter C. Again, our absolute value is already isolated, so I'm going to separate it. And we've got y plus 2 is equal to 4, and y plus 2 equals negative 4. And this one's a nice simple one step. We subtract 2 from both sides. Y is going to be equal to a positive 2. On the right side, if we subtract 2 from both sides, y is going to be equal to a negative 6. And those are our two values that we would use to be able to do this work and create a true equation. Now, letter D. We have the absolute value of 3x minus 4 is equal to negative 1. Now, your instinct might be to say, okay, well, one's negative, one's positive. But I want you to ask yourself, what is the definition of an absolute value again? And it is the positive magnitude of any given number. Can we have an absolute value that is a negative number? The answer is absolutely not. So a problem like this, and the key here is that our absolute value is isolated, okay? There is nothing else happening on the left side of that equation. So your absolute value is isolated. It's equal to a negative number, so there is no solution. There is nothing that I could put into that equation that would get me a -1 when I take the absolute value. There's no solution. Okay. All right, letter E. Again, our first step, we are isolating the absolute value. Now, this is the first time we're going to have to actually do some isolating because there's other things that are attached around your absolute value. We've got that and we've got that. So we've got a plus 22 and we've got a times -3. So we're going to start by subtracting 22 from both sides. We get -3 times the absolute value of y plus 1 equals 1 minus 22 is -21. Now you might be like, well, Mr. Boland, there's a negative there, so it's got to be no solution, right? No, because we're not isolated on the left yet. We need to divide by -3 on both sides, and now we're going to get the absolute value of y plus 1 is equal to 7. Now we're going to split this into our two equations. Y plus 1 equals 7. Y plus 1 equals -7. And we do our work. Subtract 1 from both sides. Y equals 6. Subtract 1 from both sides. Y equals -8. So those are your two answers, 6 and -8. But we had to work through a couple steps before we could even get there. Again, our absolute value has to be all alone on one side of the equation, as it is right here, before you can split it into our two pieces. Letter F is a similar one where we're going to have to isolate the absolute value first. My first step, subtract 6 from both sides, and I get 5 times the absolute value of y minus 4 is equal to 35. And now we are going to divide both sides by 5. Absolute value of y minus 4 equals 7. And now we can split this into our two because our absolute value is isolated. So y minus 4 equals 7. Y minus 4 equals -7. Add 4 to both sides. And that y is going to be equal to 7 plus 4 is 11. So we add 4 to both sides. Y is equal to -3. So those are your two values for that one. Now we have 3 you-try problems that I would like you to do on your own, and then we will go over them as a group. The first problem, our absolute value is already isolated, so we can just split this apart right away. Y minus 6 equals 7. Y minus 6 equals -7. Our first step is to add 6 to both sides, opposite operations. Y is going to be equal to 13. If we add 6 to the right, we get y is equal to -1. Our middle problem, letter H, again, our absolute value is already isolated, so we split it into 5x plus 3 is equal to 8, and 5x plus 3 equals -8. Our first step, subtract 3 from both sides. 5x equals 5. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides. 5x equals -11. Divide by 5. X is going to equal +1. Divide by 5. X is going to equal -11/5. And letter I. Again, we're going to have to work this one in order to get it isolated. So we're going to add 19 to both sides. And we get 9 times 2x plus 3 equals a positive 9. And then we divide both sides by 9. And we get the absolute value of 2x plus 3 equals 1. And now we're going to break this apart because now our absolute value is isolated. So we have 2x plus 3 equals 1. 2x plus 3 equals negative 1. Our first step, subtract 3 from both sides. 2x is equal to negative 2. Subtract 3. 2x is equal to negative 4. And then we divide both by 2. X equals negative 1. Divide by 2. X equals negative 2. Now we're bleeding into our word problem here a little bit. So we have an example. Depending on the size of each song, Luna's phone holds an average of 2,000 songs, give or take 250 songs. Write and solve an equation involving absolute value to find the maximum and minimum number of songs Luna's phone can hold. And off to the side here, we have an old school video iPod. Now, 2,000 songs is what our average is. Okay, that's information that's given to us. Give or take 250 songs is kind of an odd thing to say. And then we also, what are we actually trying to find? We're trying to find what are the maximum and minimum number of songs that her phone can hold. So we're going to say X is songs. Now, I know I need to write an absolute value that's going to be equal to something. Well, what does give or take mean? Give means add, take means subtract. So what we could say here, this is going to be plus or minus 250. So if it's plus or minus 250, if it could be plus 250 or minus 250, that's telling us what our absolute value is equal to. The amount of, or the difference between the songs on the iPod and the average of 2,000 can be 250 above or 250 below. So that's what we're actually going to be comparing. So our songs are what we start with, and we are going to subtract 2,000, and I didn't give myself quite enough room to show my absolute value bar there, but X minus 2,000. We're comparing the amount of songs on the iPod or the phone with the amount that she has, or with this plus or minus that we've got. So now we're going to see how this plays out. We have X minus 2,000 equals 250, and then X minus 2,000 equals negative 250. And we need to go ahead and add 2,000 to both sides. We get that X is equal to 2250, and we get plus 2,000 on the right. And we get that X is equal to 1,750, and both of these are measured in songs. All right. Now, the next page has a you-try problem that you guys are going to try on your own. Go ahead and try it and come back and check your answer against mine. All right, let's go over that you-try problem. It takes approximately 6 minutes for a skydiver to land after she jumps out of a plane, give or take 30 seconds. What is the range of time in seconds that it could take the skydiver to land? So first, let's look for what is our important information in this problem. So approximately 6 minutes for the skydiver to land is an important piece of information. We're also looking at give or take 30 seconds. So that could be interpreted as plus or minus 30 seconds. So the question is asking, what is the range of time in seconds that it could take the skydiver to land? So we're going to write our absolute value equation, and our comparison is to the 6 minutes, but the question is asking for us to give the answer in seconds. So 6 minutes in terms of seconds is 360 seconds. So x minus 360 is going to be equal to the 30 that we are going to be plus or minus when it comes to the landing time. So now that the absolute value is isolated, we can separate this into two equations. So we're going to have x minus 360 equals 30. And we're going to have x minus 360 is equal to negative 30. And to solve this, we're going to add 360 to both sides. And we are going to get, and we're doing that for all of the equations, we're going to get that x is going to be equal to 390 seconds, or that x is going to be equal to 330 seconds. All right, now we're going to move on to the last section, which is writing an absolute value equation. So for these, we're given a number line, and we want to find what is an equation that could give us these two possible points. So what we do first is we find our midpoint between our two values. And in this case, we have 17 to 27, so our midpoint is 25. That's going to be what we put on the inside of our absolute value, x minus 22. And then our comparison, the range is going to be how much above or how much below this could be. So we're going to count our hops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the difference between some value and 22 is going to be either 5 above or 5 below. So our absolute value is x minus 22 is equal to 5. So for letter B, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find that midpoint between our high and our low. Our midpoint is right here at 1. So we do x minus 1, the absolute value, is equal to, how far away is it? 1, 2, 3. Now, there's two you-try problems for you. I want you to do those and then check your work against mine. All right, so for this one, we find our midpoint. Our midpoint is at positive 3 here. So we have our absolute value of x minus 3, that's the number we're comparing to, and our difference, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so it's going to be equal to 5. And lastly, our final problem, we have our midpoint is going to be at negative 3. So when we do our subtraction, it's going to be x minus negative 3, which minus negative is a positive. And our range is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 away. So it's equal to 6. Those are the notes for the lesson on absolute value. If you have any questions, bring them to class tomorrow. Have a great day.